You gave me so much room for my pen.
Yep, sorry. There's. All right, this is W2 Letter Live at the Police Department.
Good morning, I'm Carrie Schneider, Outagamie County District Attorney. Seated with me is Green Bay Police Lieutenant Rick Bellinger and Appleton Police Chief Todd Thomas. We're going to provide you with some additional information this morning related to the officer-involved shooting that occurred in Appleton at Jack's Appleton Pub around closing times, around 2 a.m. during the early morning hours of Sunday, May 21st, 2017. Immediately after this incident, officers with the Green Bay Police Department were brought in to investigate the matter. After a review of the investigation and in consultation with the Green Bay Police Department, I have concluded that no criminal actions will be pursued against the officer involved in this incident. That decision comes after a review of interviews, videos, statements, and an analysis of the actions that law enforcement must use in relationship to their training and the acceptable provisions for the deadly use of force and the use of force in general. I will try to provide you with additional facts about the situation that occurred during the incident. However, I have to advise that given 2 individuals are currently facing charges from this incident, there are some limits to what information I will be able to provide. I know that some of these details you are already aware of, but given some of the information that has been previously made public, I also want to try to answer some of the additional questions I know you have. 2 officers, Lieutenant Jay Steinke and Officer Eric Aguilar, were on routine downtown foot patrol during the Saturday evening into Sunday morning shift. So that was Saturday into Sunday, May 21st. They were working a foot patrol shift on College Avenue, and at approximately 1:37 a.m., they were outside of an establishment named the Sea Vine Lounge, which is located in the same block as Jack's Apple Pub. They were approached by a pair of individuals who told them that someone had fired a gun inside of Jack's Apple Pub. Both officers ran to the bar, where a bartender at the front door also shared that same information with Lieutenant Steinke, that a man inside had fired a gun. Lieutenant Steinke and Officer Aguilar ran to the State Street side of Jack's Apple Pub, and Lieutenant Steinke entered the bar with his weapon drawn. Just prior to Lieutenant Steinke entering the bar, Henry Nellum had gotten up off of the floor where he had been engaged previously in a fight with Leander Moffett in the front northwest corner of the bar. Mr. Nellum then began running towards the State Street doorway with a gun in his hand. Parties in the bar saw him running to that exit and reacted. Jimmy Sanders was standing midway along the bar at that time, closer to the State Street side of the bar as opposed to the physical bar. As Nellum got up and ran from the front of the bar to the State Street exit, after fighting and shooting at Mr. Leander, Sanders moved from the wall of the bar, I would say, to the side where the physical bar exists in Jack's Apple Pub, and watched as Nellum ran past him. Lieutenant Steinke entered that bar, where he immediately encountered several people who were in the doorway. A female party was saying, "He's got a gun," as he entered. Lieutenant Steinke was able to see around this female, who was trying to exit the bar, and he observed Mr. Nellum running towards him, towards the State Street door, with a gun in his hand. The distance of Nellum to Lieutenant Steinke at the initial time was approximately 12 feet. And Mr. Nellum was closing the gap. Lieutenant Steinke attempted to push the female aside as Nellum continued to approach and fired 4 shots at Nellum in a span of approximately 1.5 seconds. As Lieutenant Steinke was firing at Nellum, Nellum was struck by 1 shot. But as he was firing, Lieutenant Steinke was pushed by parties who were exiting the bar. There were 4 parties in that immediate doorway attempting to exit as Lieutenant Steinke was entering and then firing to end the threat Mr. Nellum was creating. As Nellum ran to the State Street door, there was a point in time when he was literally hip by hip or side by side with Mr. Sanders. Mr. Sanders was now physically closest to the bar. Mr. Nellum was on what we would say the west side of him as Mr. Nellum continues to run at Lieutenant Steinke. They were in a distance of approximately 5 to 6 feet. It's a distance from the physical bar to some table and chairs that are in that area. The first shot fired by Lieutenant Steinke struck Mr. Nellum in his lower left bicep. A second shot struck Mr. Sanders in his lower back, striking his left iliac artery. And I'll explain a little bit later what that is if anyone needs that. Third and fourth shots fired again in that span of 1.5 seconds struck the bar and then the cash register in the bar. At this point, Lieutenant Steinke had been pushed out the door and retreated for cover behind cars that were parked along State Street. Mr. Nellum ended up with his head and upper body literally at that exit or entrance door on State Street. Lieutenant Steinke took a position of cover. Officer Aguilar was in the same position and other officers began responding and ran to both the State Street side of the bar as well as the College Avenue entrance to the bar. Officers then took other points of cover. After a point of time, they were ultimately able to enter the bar, where they then located Mr. Nellum and Mr. Sanders and a few others who remained in the bar. Because we are currently prosecuting Mr. Nellum for offenses in this matter, and I'm going to explain additional charges that will be filed today, I will not be able to release to you any of the video or the officer's body cameras because that is going to be needed in the prosecution of those cases, consistent with what we've had to do in other cases in the past. But today, because I know you still have some questions, I want to walk through some slides with you, and I think we have about 7 still shots of images from inside of Jack's bar. What I will do after, because you're all kind of positioned in a unique spot, we'll walk through these again after I conclude my comments so that if you want to get better shots of this because of where you're currently positioned, we're going to give you that opportunity. And I am not a tech person, so I hope not to boot this up. So give me 1 second. So there were several cameras that were operating inside of Apple Pub. And I'm just going to point out a couple things before I walk you through these. This entrance here, this doorway, is that State Street entrance to Jack's Apple Pub that I've described for you. The bar, this would be the back of the bar. The front of the bar would run along College Avenue here on what is at the bottom of the picture. The bar is kind of a U-shaped bar. As you see, it runs along here, continues down, and then continues along this line. The area of the fight where Mr. Nellum and Mr. Moffitt, where that fight occurred, is actually off this image. It would be down over here, if you can see where that pointer is, down to the far right, at the northwest corner of the bar. So in this image, and some of these are hard to see, and we've had to watch them, slow them down, play them back. But in this image, you can see that State Street entrance in the doorway. This is a female party. She is the one who we believe made that comment, "He's got a gun," as Officer Steinke enters the bar. This, and it'll come a little bit clearer as we continue, this image, or this portion of the image right here, is Officer Lieutenant Steinke's head as he's entering the bar. It is very difficult to see. There's another individual here, here, and here. So there are 4 males in this area, a female, and then you have Lieutenant Steinke here. Mr. Nellum runs along this path up the bar. In this image, I'm just fast forwarding, and the total length of the images I'm going to show you is just over 2 seconds of time. So in this image, we then have Lieutenant Steinke. You can kind of make him out better. He's continuing to enter the bar. This is that female. Those males are still in this position. This is where, as I described, Lieutenant Steinke tries to push this female out of the way or get around her as Mr. Nellum continues to run up this path. These individuals are still in this doorway, and some of them then start exiting. Lieutenant Steinke at this point, as you can see, is still trying to get into the bar area with the female here. Those male individuals are still back in this area. Lieutenant Steinke is actually fired by this point, I believe 2 of the 4 rounds, if not all 4. You can see one of his hands is raised, literally shooting over the shoulder of this female as she continues to push him back out the door. And these males that are back here are also trying to get out this door and push him, or encounter him, I should say. Kind of they collide as they are trying to get out the door. And here you can see as Lieutenant Steinke is still getting kind of pushed, this is his head, out of that door by the individuals who are here and this female party. And then here you can see Lieutenant Steinke is kind of over her shoulder. Female's still here. This is still one of those males that was in the doorway. The others are outside. So I'm going to slide it back and just kind of slide it forward so you can see the sequence in some fashion. You can turn the lights on then. As part of the analysis in this case, the appropriate standards for the use of force were reviewed and discussed with members of the Green Bay Police Department on multiple occasions. My conclusion after that analysis and after listening to or watching the videos, there's one that has some audio that we've been able to obtain as well as looking over the written statements and the statements made by different individuals in this action, is that Lieutenant Jay Steinke acted appropriately given the threat and actions of Mr. Nellam and what was approaching him. I want to be clear, and I hope the community understands, that officers are not trained to shoot someone in the knee, shoot the gun out of someone's hand. They are trained to end the threat. The training that officers receive is that when faced with a deadly attack or a deadly threat, they are trained to end the threat by aiming for the central nervous system of that person. There's no opportunity to fire once, wait, and respond, and fire again. At the point when they are trained to end the threat with deadly force, they are in a situation where the threat is immediate and imminent. They are trained to take, in best situations, and maintain a shooting platform, to take certain actions with their hands, with their firearms. And as we've explained, as Lieutenant Steinke encountered Mr. Nellam as he was running towards him and he began firing, he was pushed and struck by multiple parties who were attempting to exit the bar. I want to say something that I do not think anyone here can minimize. This was a significant and tragic event on many levels. The Sanders family is now left facing a future without their loved one. Throughout this pending time, the Deputy Coroner's Office has reached out to Mr. Sanders' parents. Lieutenant Bellinger has reached out to them, has spoken with them. We'll continue to work with the parents as the case progresses, and that relates to some of the additional charges that are going to be filed against Mr. Nellam today. A shooting of this nature dramatically impacts the officers, the other officers who arrive on scene, their families, and the community in whole. Every law enforcement officer in this community is trained to fire their weapon when necessary. But I can tell you all the training they go through is not close in any fashion to a situation where you actually have to engage and take that action. The stress that follows all parties, their family, is significant. I want to thank the investigators of the Green Bay Police Department for literally making themselves available to me 24 hours a day, every day, through the holiday weekend as we work to get a conclusion on this case and work to continue our investigation. I need to extend thanks to the Wisconsin crime labs both in Madison and Milwaukee who helped us assist and analyze facts and information. Kyle Anderson, their lab director, who we were calling multiple times a day, trying to push him to get things done. And Trooper Jason Schwartz, who yesterday was able to complete some reconstruction for us and help give us a better picture of that bar and the layout of that bar. I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't express the sincerest condolences to the Sanders family and those affected by the loss of his life. Well, fortunately, shootings of this nature are rare here in Outagamie County and in the U.S. Unfortunately, they are not rare in many cases as well. Just this year in April, authorities in Indiana were assessing this same type of a situation where someone was armed, and in the course of officers responding and firing, someone behind that person was struck. As you can imagine, it occurs much greater in large communities. New York State, in the last 5 years, has had 13 cases such as this, and there may be more. Those are just what we could find. The additional news I want to share is that as a result of this ongoing investigation and the information we now have obtained, there are going to be additional charges filed today against Henry Nellam. He will be facing additional charges for the attempted aggravated battery for his actions against Leander Moffett. And he's also facing a felony murder charge for the death of Jimmy Sanders, pursuant to our case law, as he was fleeing the scene. There's also carrying a concealed weapon that he is now being charged with. Deputy District Attorney Melinda Tempelis, who's in the back of the room, has copies of the criminal complaint that she will be able to provide to you at the conclusion of today's hearing. But as I said, as you're aware, because I have now filed those additional charges, these videos, these images, the officers' body cameras, I cannot legally and ethically release them at this point to any party because they are going to be used in our prosecution. I want to thank all of you for giving us the time we needed. I know when you were here last week after Mr. Nellam's hearing, I told many of you I'd try to get you answers as soon as we could. And I think that I appreciate your giving us that time. As you can imagine, we talk to one witness, they say something. The next day we talk to another witness, we got to go back to the first witness because new information comes to light. And that's an ongoing phenomenon we face in every case. It's not unique to this case. We're going to take any questions you have. Captain Thomas may have some comments he wants to share. Do you want to share those before questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chief Thomas. I do that all the time at APD. You went from captain to Green Bay. I used to call it Chief Heline, Captain Heline once when you were up here. So.
First, want to pass on our condolences to the family and friends of Mr. Sanders. It's a tragic incident. Mr. Sanders was accidentally struck by gunfire that was intended to stop a gunman who had just shot at someone in the bar. I've spoken with a family member and will share whatever details we can with the family to try to answer all of their questions. I want to thank the Green Bay Police Department for their quick response and their timely professional investigation they did. This was a very challenging incident to investigate. They had to overcome several deceptive statements made by individuals that were involved in it and tampering of evidence at the crime scene. The community should be very thankful for the DA's office for making this investigation a priority. I contacted the district attorney immediately when I arrived on scene, and she was involved in the investigation from that point forward. A critical piece to having a credible investigation is that it is overseen by an experienced, independent prosecutor who works for the community. I also want to thank the Wisconsin Department of Justice, the Attorney General's Office, and the State Crime Lab for quickly testing some of the evidence in this case so that we could provide you with the details of this incident. We all understand how important it is to provide information to the public as quickly as possible without compromising the investigation. In the past, we have explained the agreement that we have in place to ensure a timely investigation into these types of incidents. This occurred just over 12 days ago, and the investigators were able to provide details on the incident, and the DA was able to provide her ruling. To provide perspective to this, I asked a staff member to review all of the officer-involved shootings that have occurred in the state of Wisconsin since January of 2016. Of the 25 incidents, the average time between the date of the incident and the prosecutor making their decision has been 61 days. The longest was 147 days, the shortest was 12 days. This was 13 days. The investigation into a shooting on Kensington Drive last year was completed in 10 days. I think this validates our process, and I hope it answers any questions or concerns the community has about our transparency or our timely release of information. I I want to thank the members of the community who were patient and understood the importance of in letting the investigators do their job before reaching conclusions. When we make assumptions or speculate about what happened, that hurts all the people involved, including the victims. We're living in a time now that when these tragedies happen, we know that there will be groups demanding for the immediate release of details or any video of the incident. And the same people will demand an impartial and fair investigation. Those are two competing interests. Quickly releasing specific details or a video of an event will undermine the entire investigation. Any statement that is made or evidence that is collected after that could be compromised. A professional and credible investigation should be the top priority for all of us. I want to thank the many members of the African American community who offered their support and urged patience before people made decisions on this incident. We've worked hard in the last couple years to build those relationships, and when these things happen, you really test the bonds, and we thank them for all their support. This is one of the worst situations a police officer could ever be put into, so we regularly train to respond to them. Whether this happens in your child's elementary school, the church, your business, or a bar, the police response is the same. Preservation of life is our top priority, even at the risk of our own. The dispatchers and officers involved in this incident performed exceptionally well. First responders immediately addressed a deadly threat, secured the scene, and quickly provided medical assistance to Mr. Sanders even before the scene was safe. I want to thank all of the agencies that assisted us, especially the Fire Department and Gold Cross, for placing themselves in a potentially dangerous situation. This was an incident that no police officer or member of the public ever wants to be in. But this incident occurred because of the actions of one man, a convicted felon who was illegally carrying a handgun in a bar, who got intoxicated and decided to get into a fight, who pulled out his gun and shot around at someone, and then ran towards a door with a gun in his hand. This man caused this tragic incident, not Mr. Sanders and not Lieutenant Steinke. When these active shooter type of incidents occur, we don't train our officers to wait. Hostages can be taken and lives can be lost. We train our officers to run towards the gunfire and then engage the threat, asking them to risk their own lives, and that's exactly what Lieutenant Steinke did. Lieutenant Steinke has developed a reputation that many of you either know or have learned of since this incident. He is one of the most caring and compassionate people that you will meet. We have seen an outpouring of support for him from those who have been able to get to know him and the amazing number of people he has helped. It's those relationships that he has built with our community members and the positive impact he has had on people's lives that will be his legacy.
Does anyone have questions at this time?
Here, what was the family?
Oh, here, we're just going to start from my right and work the way down the line, okay? So,
Yeah, in the criminal complaint, the initial one, it didn't mention, I guess, Sanders' actual involvement in the situation. Are you able to shed more light on what he was doing? I know there have been some rumors that he was trying to get the weapon away. Like, what was actually happening other than he was being...
to the extent that I can, because of the prosecution for the felony murder, what we know, just like Mr. Moffitt and Mr. Nellum did not know each other, because that's part of the criminal complaint, Mr. Sanders did not know Mr. Nellum. Mr. Sanders did not know Mr. Moffitt. Mr. Sanders went into the bar with two other individuals, maybe two other females, that night and was just there, a bystander like many other people. He wasn't involved in the first incident with Mr. Moffitt and Mr. Nellum, and just happened to be standing by the bar when Mr. Nellum ran out of the bar.
I'm
sorry,
Sarah Farley.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sitting down here. You said no criminal actions against Officer Steinke. Any administrative action?
Per policy, we'll have a use of force review team that will review the incident, and they'll make a recommendation whether his actions fell under policy or fell outside of policy. And that'll probably get completed within the next couple of weeks.
Would you consider Mr. Sanders a victim? Would you describe him as a victim?
He's charged as a victim today for felony murder related to Mr. Nellum.
the guy who was shot, Mr. Sanders.
That's what I'm saying. Mr.
Okay.
Sanders in the new complaint is listed as a victim for the felony murder count.
Okay, and would the city or Outagamie County be vulnerable possibly to a civil suit in this matter?
I don't know how Outagamie County would be, because I do not employ Lieutenant Steinke. That's an issue that the city will have to address. Okay, then we'll keep moving on.
Did Lieutenant Steinke say he was aiming at Sanders or Nellum?
He was aiming at the man with the gun, Mr. Nellum.
So just to be clear, I mean, was Mr. Sanders ever armed in any way that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of. Keep moving down. Emily?
What the criminal complaints for the Nellum and Sullivan both reference Mr. Nellum handing the gun off. At what point does that happen then, I guess?
Yep, I think it's detailed in this, I'm trying to remember what I put in the Sullivan complaint, but in the Sullivan complaint, after Lieutenant Steinke has fired his firearm, Miss Sullivan approaches Mr. Nellum, who's now literally in that open State Street doorway, and that is when the gun is then passed between Nellum to Sullivan, and then within 5 seconds, 6 seconds, she leaves with that firearm. Okay?
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess how is Lieutenant doing?
He's doing well. We've got a companion officer that's been working with him and his family.
And then one more question.
Yeah.
I guess Mr. Sanders' family's reaction to these findings and the fact that from the very beginning.
They're struggling. We've spoken with the mom and the father, Mr. Sanders' parents. We've spoken to some other family members. They had many of the same questions you had, and we've given them that opportunity to try to come today and meet with the parents. We'll meet with them because now Mr. Sanders is a victim, so they're going to get all the crime victim rights from our office in that regard. But as you can imagine, when you get a call someone dies in the middle of the night from a car accident, something unexpected, it tears a hole in you. And so they're slowly working, as everyone does, to kind of work forward. Yep, I'm just going to finish this way before I go back.
Did Officer Steinke have his body camera on?
No, he did not. In the time literally from getting that information, there's people inside with a firearm. He literally runs around the bar and enters with his firearm. So you have to flip it on. He did not flip it on. Okay. And then I'll come back to the side. Come down again. Okay.
You mentioned deceptive statements. How did you handle witness testimony?
Well, what we've done is they would speak, and I don't want to speak for Lieutenant Bellinger, but they'd speak to one individual at different times. We were then reviewing video footage from inside a Jack's Apple pub and the officer's body camera or street camera video, and sometimes that was inconsistent with what people had shared. So we'd have to go back and talk to those individuals again.
And also, Drew Sullivan, will she be a witness in the case, and how will her own sentencing affect this?
We have that happen many times where you have multiple people at an incident and they get charged with a variety of offenses. So we'll just have to handle that as we prosecute her and as we prosecute Mr. Nellum.
You mentioned body cam footage. If Lieutenant Steinke's body cam was not on, other officers on the scene had their body cams on?
Officer Aguilar, who kind of wasn't running and actually held and went to a cover position, was able to flip his on, but then foot patrol is not uncommon every weekend night if you've been downtown, so they had multiple officers or details, which are usually 2 officers, on foot patrol. So those officers, once Lieutenant Steinke and Officer Aguilar got that information, they broadcast it as they're running in, and others come. So there are other officers immediately at the scene who had some footage as well.
In the original complaint, it talks about a man who's trying to break up the fight between Nellum and Moffett.
It's not Mr. Sanders. It's just another gentleman who was at the bar who didn't know anybody, but just saw this fight going on for a while and then went to try to break it up.
And were the 2 people who came with Mr. Sanders, were they with him when he was shot?
No. No.
Do you know how long he had been there before the shot?
I would estimate less than 6 minutes.
It's unfortunate, it's the wrong place at the wrong time.
Absolutely. And then you have a group of people who stayed in the bar and then are trying to get out as Mr. Nellum gets up, and then you have that interplay in that small doorway.
So for the people who, say were protesting and were upset about this, I guess what is kind of the response to, I guess how, like you said, that there, Officer Lieutenant Steinke acted appropriately, I guess how do you kind of?
I think a lot of people, we live in a great community where we try to be as transparent and share what we can when we can, but we have to be aware that if we shared those videos immediately, the 25 other people Green Bay PD has interviewed since could have had their statements tainted or seen information that was released. So that's where we have a duty to protect and preserve and obtain an untainted statement. Literally, if Lieutenant Bellinger and I were in the same place, we wouldn't get interviewed together. They'd separate us out. So I say what I saw, he tells what he says, or what he saw. So we try to do that with people. It's unfortunate, and I know people start to speculate, and they go, a pebble becomes a huge rock by the time it gets to the end of the mountain. So we just ask for their patience. We ask them, to share their thoughts and their concerns for the family and the officers and the community that's involved. It's not, I don't think it was a response we weren't expecting. We expected some of that, but like we said, we try to get you as much information as we can when we can.
So at this point, you could say confidently that he acted.
Absolutely.
Just back to the body cam, you said you didn't have enough time to flip it on. Are you going to be going forward with this mandating that they have it on at all times?
No, that we talked about that before. That's a huge storage issue. I think last year we talked about some of the technology that they're working on with body cameras where they self-activate, kind of like some of the body or the squad car videos will activate at a certain speed or when an officer turns the lights and siren on. They're working on some technology now where if an officer starts running or maybe he falls down, the camera activates. Because it happens. When you're standing outside a bar and somebody runs outside the door and says there's a guy inside shooting, your first reaction is going to go to your firearm, your sidearm. And that's what he did, and he ran to the door. It's not to try to find your body camera and turn it on. Again, that could be a second or two lost. So we have it written in our policy that that's acceptable, that they don't tape if they're under those types of situations.
We've even had officers turn it on and accidentally turn it right back off, not realizing, because they're trying to not think of this and turning that equipment on, but getting their firearm or getting to the incident or getting to where people need them.
Would his body camera have been vital to this investigation since you had other cameras, I guess,
Because we have the other cameras, I don't think that it would have shown us anything more, and I think given what I could show you there, you're gonna see this white shirt of this woman directly in front of him is what you're going to see, or a blur of that and the other people that were in that doorway. So fortunately, Jack's Apple Pub had the video they did. We've had a lot of cases where we've had video, but maybe, as in, for example, Luna, those of you who followed the Chongley case, they had that camera been 10 feet to a different angle, we would have had the shooting on film. So you just never know, too, are you going to catch everything on those cameras that they do have. So we were very fortunate. Jack's Apple Pub and their owner, Mr. Greiner, was immensely helpful and turned that over and said, what can they do to help?
And that was saying that criminal charges are not going to be filed against the officer involved. We've seen in other communities throughout the country in recent years that when those announcements have come down within a matter of hours, you have a lot of people, protesting on the streets. It turns ugly sometimes. Are you expecting something like that could happen here in Appleton? And is there any steps being taken to try and prevent anything further tragic from going on?
I'll first respond, and I'll let you respond second. I grew up here in Outagamie County, and we are blessed to live in an amazing community where a lot of people grew up here or they have made their roots here. And everybody, we still have a lot of situations where neighbors leave their doors unlocked because they trust their neighbors. And we have a lot of people, I think, who trust law enforcement that they work with. They're the same officers that they grew up with or went to elementary school with. They're the same people who their children are at school with them. I think they respect them for their role in their work. I think they respect the role my office has and the assessments we have to make and the calls we have to make in these cases. Could it happen? Sure. But I think I trust the community and the people that live here and the people who've given us that time to have the time to process this and share what we know at this point. And I'll let Chief Thomas speak on the second part of your question.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any, but we do prepare for things like that. Again, I grew up in this community, and I know the people here. I think once they have the facts, we try to give them as many as we possibly can, again, quicker than you're going to get in any other part of the state. I think we've got one of the best processes out there so that we can get the information out there quickly to the community. I think that helps build trust. I think we worked hard to build that trust in the community in the last, for decades, but we really focused on it in the last couple of years. I've gotten more support, calls, and support from different groups in the community. So I think you're always going to have a few people that are going to protest, and they have the right to do that as long as they do it peacefully and they don't disturb others. And we'll protect their right to protest. I have no issue with that. That's what our duty is. But I think the community will understand what happened here. It was just a tragic incident.
So any estimation on when that video and stuff will be available? Is it at the end of the trials? Is it?
It's after sentencing.
Okay.
And then if there's an appeal process, we'll just have to assess what, if anything, we could release at that point.
Will it be shown in court, though?
Yes. Yes, it would be. I mean, those things are going to be vital pieces for us, helping us tell the story. So at some point, it's going to become public through that format. Much of this will be.
And was it one camera inside the bar or were there two?
There's 5 camera angles at different spots. One's directly over the till, so all you see is the people taking the money in and out of the register. But there are other images and other angles. One's back by the pool area. One's, as you saw, that State Street entrance. One is a different angle of the front bar, the College Avenue entrance. I think I covered them all. I feel like I'm missing one, but there's 5 different cameras in that bar.
And how many of them captured part of the shooting or all of it?
I would say 3 of them.
Chief Thomas, in the end, your officer shot an unarmed, innocent man. Could you just kind of tell us what you're doing with the force to get that message out to them, or if you're taking any actions to try to make sure this doesn't happen again?
I think you're making an assumption there, but
Well, he was
I-
unarmed, and you describe him as a victim, and
Right.
you say he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Sure, there's something called a greater danger theory. If I run into your place of business or the classroom that your child is in and there's a person in there, on a report of somebody shooting your children or your coworkers, and I run into that office and I engage somebody that has a gun, there might be people behind that gunman, there might be people next to that gunman, or even in front of that gunman, and I have to make a decision. Is it a greater danger for me not to engage that target, and that person, while I hesitate and wait, shoots 2, 3, 4 other people? Or do I engage that target knowing that there's a risk that there might be an innocent person hit? And that's all covered in our training in the state firearms manuals, use force manuals, case law. So we'll have our use of force review team take a look at the incident, and if there's any things that we need to address, we'll address it out of that.
I think it's important to note too, from the slides you saw, Lieutenant Steinke took action on a threat, and beyond his control, he was moved from his position of firing. That's something that's completely out of his control, and he made a split-second decision to end the threat with something happening that he couldn't control.
And from the statute side of things, we haven't prosecuted in my 20 years being with the DA's office a felony murder charge, but it's out there so that when you have that situation of someone engaging in an offense and as a result someone dies, they can be charged under the felony murder statute. So I probably gave all of you homework now to do to go look that up, but that is what the statutes allow in this situation as well.
What kind of training do officers have, who are walking the avenue on Friday and Saturday nights to deal with these kinds of situations, dark bar? Obviously people are intoxicated. Training.
Sure. We actually just did training a little over 2 months ago, active shooter type training where we go into classrooms. We have a school in town, and we ran scenarios and talked through incidents just like this. And that applies, like I said, whether it's a church, a school, a crowded bar, the same process, the same training applies. So we train every year on that, and we have a lot of discussion on it. As you all know, you cover these stories pretty regularly. This is not unusual. Active shooters in bars, restaurants, houses of worship are much more common now than they used to be. So we train for that.
Just to give you a little bit of information too, Lieutenant Steinke has been with the police force for 29 years. He has chosen as a supervisor to have the downtown central night shift district as his shift. Given his seniority, you can imagine he probably could pick just about anything. But he loves the downtown area. Many of our witnesses, when we were taking statements initially that morning, Green Bay Police Department we're not saying I saw an officer or he yelled up to an officer. They were specifically saying I saw Lieutenant Steinke because he is down there. He walks through those bars regularly on his shift. They know him. So he's very familiar with the layout of many of those bars, the ways people get in and out of the bars. And he has a lot of respect of everyone, from the bar owners to the people who are out there every weekend getting highly intoxicated. Jay treats everybody the same.
When might he be back to full duty?
We have to have those discussions yet.
Oh, go ahead.
When I was at the peaceful protest this past weekend, some of the people there, they felt like they were being targeted, the African American community being targeted. They said this is the second unarmed shooting Is that correct? You said thank you to the African American community. So how would you respond to the people who feel like they are being targeted?
Again, we didn't ask them to meet with us. We've had several different outreaches that we've done. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a couple people, one of our captains and officers present on fair and impartial policing at the library, where we talked, they were there for several hours talking to community members about what fair and impartial policing is and how we train every one of our officers is mandated to go through training with biases and recognize that we all have our biases and acknowledge that and make sure you don't act on it. There's not many police departments in the state that are doing that. We open that up to the public so that we can show the public this is how we train our officers. We've had 3 community conversations at Lawrence University hosted by the Diversity and Inclusion Vice President. We've had 40 to 50 people at those meetings. Great conversation, a lot of suggestions. We take a lot, we listen a lot. We look for ways that we can partner with them on some initiatives. We came up with some really good things that we're going to work on with Lawrence. We invite them to join us on those. We don't usually see them, but again, we'll lean forward. We continue to lean forward. We hope it's reciprocated at some point and get to know us.
And I don't know, I mean, and they might have been referencing statewide or in another part of the state. I don't know of another unarmed person here being shot in Outagamie County. As I said, this is the first time we've pursued a felony murder charge in the 20 years I've been in with the DA's office, but it could have happened somewhere else. Yes, like I said, just in April, Indiana was assessing and analyzing one of those cases. So, and really, kind of from what we showed you, you know, it could have been anybody standing in that spot where Mr. Sanders was.
Speaking of the protesters, so one of the things that came up was questions about kind of the legitimacy of the investigation, given that Chief Thomas had worked at Green Bay for quite a few years before you came here. Can you speak to that? And what would you say to those people who are questioning legitimacy?
Oh, I understand that. I've been out of there for 2.5 years. They have a new chief. The commander of that division was not in the division when I was there. The lieutenants that oversaw that investigation were not in that division when I was there. We actually, if we don't have Green Bay do our investigations, and like I said, we got it done within, they got it done within 2 weeks. Our backup is the DCI, Department of Criminal Investigation. The community is going to be looking at probably several months to get any answers. I don't want to do that to our community. As far as the conflict of interest, there, as time passes, I hope that goes away. But again, I contact the district attorney's office immediately, and the district attorney is the one that provides oversight. And if the district attorney's office was ever uncomfortable with anything, they could obviously bring it to me, and then we could make some changes. But our officers, again, we work closer with Department of Criminal Investigations on a weekly basis than we ever do with Green Bay. So I think if there's any relationship or connection there, it would be one closer with DCI than actually with Green Bay.
Anybody else?
Do you have an estimate for how many witnesses were questioned in this incident?
Oh dear. Over 40 to 50.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's a lot of people.
We'll give them one. I think they're good. So Mindy Tempelis, I think, is in the back of the courtroom somewhere. She has copies of that new criminal complaint on Mr. Nellum. And then we'll give you that opportunity if you want to try to capture some still images or some better shots of those still images as well. Thank you.